kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe. You've sanctified us with mitzvot, and you've commanded us to engage with words of Torah. So the whole idea with the Pirkei Avot, again, it's Mishnah, it's late Mishnah. And so there's not a lot of Gemara with it, but the commentary then comes through us. Why do I mention that there's not a Gemara? Because the Gemara are the comments about the Mishnaic or oral Torah level that was codified around the year 200 of the Common Era. The Gemara then added commentary first by the sages in the land of Israel through the Yerushalmi or the Jerusalem Talmud up until about the 5th century or so. The Babylonian Talmud, which was, of course, the great gift of intellect and spirit by the sages of what is modern day Babylonia, modern day Iraq and Iran, Babylonia and Persia. They added each generation more and more commentaries, but not so much on Pirkei Avot because it was a late text. But that's okay because there's other commentary that we can avail themselves of, as well as an opportunity then to have our commentary for us to weigh in and to share our thoughts as well. So with that, I'm going to bring up the text, and there it is. Hooray. So, all right. Okay, I'm gonna make this a little bit larger. How's that? Okay. Good.
Bigger, please.
Even bigger?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I could do it over here, so
Yes, bigger would be greater for me.
I just want to say, Ani, if I have a appendicitis, I'll meet you at Rose.
Ah, okay. We'll go with that. So again, it was downloaded to me in a perfect sense. Now I don't know what this text right here is not as good as I had hoped. Oh shoot. Well, we'll just do our best. Can you have some patience with me, and I'll read from the original as well. That helps. So we're on 220, where Rabbi Tarfon is teaching. So would someone like to read his piece?
I'll read it.
Go ahead, Alan.
Rabbi Tarfon teaches the day is short, the task is long, the workers are lazy, sometimes crazy. The stakes are high. Master is demanding. The master is demanding.
Right. So what do you get from that?
What? Well, I have to see it again. When I read, I can't remember it.
That's all right.
If you could enlarge it, Rabbi.
This is even better text. Go. Hold on. Look at this.
Nice.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Better?
Yes.
Okay.
That's in the high holiday liturgy, isn't it?
Right. So it's famous, right?
Yeah.
So let's hold off on that one because we skipped 219. Again, the text, the computer switched around. This is the more of the PDF text. So Alan, read this first one first. The Rabbi Elazar ben Arach teaches.
Rabbi Elazar ben Arach teaches, be diligent in Torah and know how to answer the challenger. Know before whom you study and know that the reward is linked to an effort.
Okay, again, before we look over at Rami Shapiro's commentary, let's look at this a bit, and maybe you can add some of your own thoughts. That it teaches, be diligent in Torah and know how to answer the challenges. Now, there's going to be people who come up to challenge, not just to offer different points of view. That's not a negative challenge, but someone who's cynical, who says, why bother with any of it, right? And before whom you study, well, is that your teacher? Is it your colleague? Or what else? And then what reward can be linked to this activity of study? So before we look over at Shapiro's, let's share with each other.
Well, the whom is capitalized, so I think it's referring to God. You're studying before God.
Okay. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Well, I know this group is diligent in Torah, and when there's a challenge, we challenge. And that is being honest, and there's a reward always from the facilitator to enhance the situation.
Okay. Well, you're saying that the reward then comes from a facilitator, but that may be the teacher
No.
or the guide. Nancy pointed out that the whom is capitalized. So that is the great whom, God who creates all life, and we're all of God. And that sense of, is there a sense of reward? Is that why we do study? Does study have its own reward? What would that reward be? And what if you have a trouble theologically? If, maybe you don't really connect with yet a relationship with God that you can identify or express. Does that mean that study doesn't have value for you?
Well, study's about getting an internal reward, a personal reward.
Right.
Either knowledge or understanding or grace or the ability to ask more questions. Thank goodness for Judaism, because that's what we do.
Love it. That's very, very good. Arnie and then Fern.
I mean, it keeps circling around the same concept. Torah is the core. It's the central pillar of Judaism. And repeatedly, I mean, not all religions have that clean central core. Islam comes close with the Quran. But the idea being is that you are to focus and keep studying it. It's going to give you your way of life. It's going to give you your rewards. It's going to explain a lot of things. The key thing is it'll stop you from praying. And distractions are to be avoided by keeping your eyes focused on the ball. I mean, and so it keeps revolving around that same thing. And like I said, Judaism, the Torah is what keeps us from wandering off. And you got to accept that. Otherwise, find another religion.
Okay, Arnie, Fern?
I was just going to say, like Nancy, the first thing I noticed was the capitalized W in whom. But then you realize that this was not written in English. We're reading something in translation. So it was the choice of the translator to put that, to capitalize that word. Another translation might not include that, or a different interpretation could be a lowercase w, and then it's a much broader interpretation.
No, that's wonderful. That's very, very good. But what about for you? I mean, how do you relate to it? Do you think there's a reward? Do you think there's a whom that insists that we study? Or what is that relationship? And who is the challenger?
Well, again, the challenger could be either the individual or the facilitator. But if you add Talmud to Torah, you're on a pretty good track. And I take classes at Ali and everyone at Sinai, and I get rewarded by the group, by the facilitator, and that's my spiel.
Good. Now, to the text itself, the dalifne mi ata amal, because that's a amel that is know before whom you are engaging this text, is related to another passage that we have in the Talmud, mi ata milifne ata omed, know before whom you stand. Again, there are references to God, but again, that's a midrash, that's an interpretation, and each of us have our own way of reading into that text. So the reward, I think each of us, we're here for a reason. There's study, there's inspiration, there's insight, and the challenge again is not a negative, at least in my understanding. The regular challenge of people with different ideas is not negative at all. What's negative is someone who says, "Why bother study?" What was Chauncey of in being there, right? So, I like to watch TV, right? I mean, there are people who don't bother with any study or any intellectual engagement or any open to any challenge. They only watch their channel, read that column, and talk to these people because they don't want to have any new ideas. So I don't think that's study at all either. The whole idea of chavrusa is that we're in and engaging on a higher level. To Arnie's thing, I want to add one other piece as well. The goal, at least from what I've been able to understand, and I've been studying it for a while, and I've been more recently inspired by Daniel Boyorkin, extraordinary Talmudic scholar, whose main thrust when he teaches Talmud is to acknowledge that the goal of the rabbis was not just to have us focus on Torah, not on Torah, because the Torah, 5 books of Moses, was there. The Sadducees were the ones who only focus only on Torah. The Karaites only wanted to focus on Torah. What the rabbis wanted us to focus on was the oral Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh, the midrashic approach, that which came after the text, because the text itself is concrete. What comes after, the commentary, the give and take, the masau matan, man, that's alive, that's dynamic, that goes from generation to generation. They said, keep it alive, keep the dynamic qualities alive, let it reflect and evolve with our changing circumstances. That's where the rabbis came on. So their whole idea of Talmud Torah Kineged Kulam was that if you stop studying with the idea of, in effect, participating by creating Torah through your interpretation and your intake, if you stop that, then all you have is a fossil. But if you continue it, then the Torah is alive, and Torah in the large sense of Torah, not just the first 5 books of the Bible. Yeah, Jerry, and then Nancy. Jerry, you got to unmute though, buddy. Nancy, why don't you go? There you go.
There it is. Yeah, I think the study of Torah actually gives you a blueprint for how to live a life, and that's what I get out of it, that when the Torah was handed down to the Jewish people, it was just how to live. It wasn't, fabled stories. It had meaning to it.
Right. But again, the study of Torah for us has meant for the last 2,000 years, not just reading the text of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, but to read it in dialogue with the commentary that has been written in each generation. I mean, that's thousands of years of commentary. And then to add your own, for you to add your thoughts. Nancy.
I forgot what your original question was, Rabbi. But my response is in response to that. When they're talking about the challenger, I don't see the challenger as simply a living being, be it the leader or the people you're studying with, or friends or what community. The challenger, in a broader sense, is life and all the vicissitudes of life, and how we're challenged by daily stuff. And so in that case, it's very helpful to go to Torah to get some solutions for how to manage it.
I love that. That's very, very good. Thank you, Nancy. Who else anyone else before we look at Rami Shapiro's commentary? Okay. Wish me luck.
Look.
God bless us. All right, so let's 48, 49, and 50. Nancy, why don't you read 48?
I'll be happy to if you could enlarge it.
I will.
Is that the one at the top?
Yeah,
There
on the
we go.
left-hand side.
Thank you. One who knows the truth is never angered by another's questions or opinions. When people challenge you, answer with compassion and invite them to see what is and not what you or they should be, and what you or they imagine should be.
Right. Keep your mind flexible, both in entertaining a challenge to your beloved opinion, right? And keep your mind open to that. And hopefully, by the way you respond, they'll see that, oh, you know what? Now we're really in a dialectic. We can share ideas back and forth without feeling that I own that idea or you own your idea. Rather, we are creating ideas that we share in, and not to necessarily accept or reject wholesale. Good. Arnie, you want to read number 49? This is Arnie. This is Rami, to know before whom you study. Oh no, I got to get Fern on this one because she's the grammarian.
Sorry, I was muted. Which one did you want me to read, Rabbi?
49, because it's the
Okay. For the rabbis, study is a means for shifting from narrow mind to spacious mind. Do not study absent-mindedly, but be aware of the greater one opening in you as you.
Well, that's pretty cool. I.e., that there's a connection with God, not outside us, but in us. And the idea about study is that it inspires us all of a sudden to realize that we can have that mochin the gadlut, that expansive mind that embraces beyond that which I originally thought and comprehended. So obviously the raison d'etre for study is to expand your mind and to challenge preconceived opinions. Wonderful. Arnie, what about number 50? This is on, and to know that there is a reward in the effort for study.
The reward for study is awakening the spacious mind and returning to your true nature as the image and likeness of God. It's not a matter of quantity, but quality. The effort is what turns you, not the knowledge gained from it.
Wow.
Stuff, yeah.
I mean, that's a hard one because on one hand, when you find out something, you learn something new. I just want to share it, and thank God, for Susan, and she reads something, hey Rick, check this out, and then and I'll do the same for her, and that's why I love the fact that we have these classes that we can turn each other on to new ideas and to thoughts. So I do love the knowledge, but this point of view is that's not just the knowledge that you gain, but it's the effort from it. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, that's what we tell children.
Well, it's a wonder. I mean, that's basically, I got a question, which is a little aside. Do you think if the temples had not been destroyed, if the temples had not been destroyed, okay, would we ever have evolved to what we are now? I'm talking in terms of the whole approach to study, to religion, to customs. If it had not been destroyed, the rabbis were pretty smart guys. They had to keep the religion alive, and it appeared they created a system that is incredible. I mean, it is. You got to be in awe of their thoughts at the time.
It's a great question, which has is analogous to so many other questions. I.e., there was this disaster. By the way, spoiler alert! It's the topic of my Rosh Hashanah sermon. That after destruction, there's creation, right? And it's almost like it's hardwired into the world. After destruction, there's creation. After a forest fire, there is, we know nature doesn't just quit, didn't just burn down the forest, man, new life burst through. And that's a part of that cycle. But from a human point of view, we're not just nature. We're not just hard drive for it. We have to have that will after a destruction, after a setback, after frustration to recreate. And so certainly there's evidence of that with after the destruction of the temple. But here's one thing to challenge that, Arnie, and that is that we already had synagogues well before the destruction of the temple. There were synagogues all over, and not only the land of Israel, but throughout. Why? Because making pilgrimage to that wonderful center of Judaism in Jerusalem was marvelous. But in the days before fast cars and automobiles, planes, trains, and automobiles, That was a once in a lifetime thing. If even that, people would make a pilgrimage. So where are you going to go on a day to day, on a week to week, on a month to month, right? And so the synagogue, which is a Greek term anyway, can be dated at least to that Greek era, the Hellenistic era, in which we would gather for study and for communal support and experience. So the rabbis didn't create it out of whole cloth, but they, like every one of us, has that challenge. What is it? After setback, after loss, I can either quit or I can go forward and do my best. And going forward and doing my best is a process, because what I'm going to create is not the perfect solution. I'm going to have to futz and grow and change and evolve and be flexible. But man, Jews don't quit. We don't quit, right? Ask any waiter or waitress in a restaurant. Jews quit, right? Wasn't this supposed to come with a side of this?
That's it. Just one of the, Rabbi, one of the
Can we sit in that table over there instead?
one of the thought for anybody here who's an educator, okay? I trained medical students and residents and fellows all my life. And, think about your own training. I'm looking around the docs, what you end up doing and how fast you learn new things. You were trained for years to think, to challenge, to expand. And I mean, here it's built in. Medicine, that's what we were trained for. So when something new comes down the pike, or if you're in shape to deal with it. And so it's very enlightening. I mean, this is pretty smart stuff.
It's wonderful. Thank you. That's a great analogy with medicine. Nancy, you want to share?
You just brought up, Rabbi, the question that I've been pondering for decades, and I want your answer. You said Jews don't quit. I want to know, there's lots of different groups of people in the world, different colors, nationalities, whatever. What is it? How, excuse me. What happened? How is it that we as Jews are not quitters, that we're thinkers, that we're questioners, that we are what we are? What happened?
Right.
Make that happen.
Right. I'll give you a short answer, but I want to amplify what you just said, because we didn't just maintain that in a secure homeland.
Right.
We were doing this on the fly. We were doing this on the fly in the diaspora, chased from one border to the other, facing one persecution after the other, up until now, right? We've had plenty of opportunities to quit, and there are individual Jews have quit. Scores and scores of them have quit. It's a man, I can't deal with it anymore. But the core of us haven't. And I think, in my mind, it is dealing with the covenant, that we feel that there is a relationship that we have. There is meaning and purpose, that we do connect with God. We do connect with the meaning and purpose of our lives. And most importantly, acknowledging, because we're not living in a fantasy world, we know that I am mortal. The people that I'm talking to are mortal. And yet ideas and hope and covenant and thought transcends death. And so if I teach, if I build, if I connect, if I prepare that next generation and teach them how to teach their next generation, then okay. If it didn't work out in France, I'll go to England. If it didn't work out in England, I'll go to South America. If it didn't work out there, I'll come to the United States. If it didn't work out here, whatever, right? We're going to figure out how it goes, because it's not just about me. I have a responsibility to teach my children and to teach them that their lives have meaning and purpose. There is a connection, a covenant, a brit with God.
Thank you. Thank you. I like it.
Thank you. I should use that for another sermon. They're coming to come, people.
Do it.
Anyone else? Let's go ahead, Fern.
Well, I back to the emphasis on process as opposed to end product or result. That's what we tell children. I look at how hard you're working. I like the way you're working on that. Not, as Julia knows, this is the best picture I've ever seen by a 3-year-old. It's the process that's important. And, thinking I love to do crossword puzzles, and it's the process. I mean, once I'm done, it's like, I forget all about it, but it's the process of doing it that I enjoy. Yeah, it's nice to get it done, but it's the process that's
I love it. And Julie, maybe you can, that's a wonderful, because teachers do that exactly. Because on one hand, you look at it and you don't want to say, oh, this is the most perfect piece of art that I've ever seen to a young artist, or it's the most wonderful essay that's ever been written to a young writer. You don't want to knock it down either. It's like a yes and. Yes, you've got some wonderful things. And have you thought about this, or where do you want to go with that, et cetera? Julie, you want to speak to that a little bit?
No, that's pretty much it.
Well, you might say, I like this little thing right over here. And, I like the color. I mean, Julia knows.
Basically what I notice, kids don't have edit buttons like adults do. Kids just create, and they don't think about what it really looks like until the end. And then they're like, what do you think? Adults have edit buttons, and we're hard on ourselves, and we need to, so I talk about in class sometimes, jazz musicians, when they're in the flow, will turn off their executive functioning and they'll just create. And it's just the freedom of process. And to maybe link this back to studying Torah, because I'm really captured by that idea of the spacious mind, which is that idea that the executive functioning, the edit button, kind of takes a back seat, and let the ideas come in and let yourself flow and think about it and learn and be open. Because that's what I notice in creative process, is that adults are like, oh, I got to get this right. I got to learn it the exact way. And you can't, it's too hard. It's a struggle. So you have to, I like this spacious mind. I'm going to steal that. I think that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, it's
but
an old probabilistic
anything you're doing, any creative thing you're doing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well,
Yeah,
with the jazz, Kathy, I'll get you because they're riffing and they're just letting their emotions going. There will be an off note. Thelonious Monk will hit a clunker. But what's cool about Thelonious is that after the clunker, he builds in the clunker, and then that clunker becomes a part of the theme, and they'll come back to bang, that little flat note, and he'll come back to it, and all of a sudden the flat note is a part of the rhythm, and he's to take something that's not perfect and to work it into the creation. Man, isn't that awesome? So there's a lot of different analogies with it. Kathy, what would you like to share?
It's there's one word that's floating around, especially with the younger crowd, is perfect. Yeah, what would you like to eat? The perfect. That's perfect. Everything's perfect, and no, it's not. As a writer, it's very hard for me, but that first draft is crap. And what I had to learn is that I had to give myself permission to write crap. And because I just want to get the story down, all the themes and whatever, and then I can go back and fix it later. You don't write the first draft and then send it off to the agent or editor, because you'll never get published. But the real writing comes in the editing, when you have all the stuff, all the garbage down, and to sift through it and find the good stuff and then build on that. Again, like Thelonious Monk. So
that's awesome. That's really wonderful. Okay, let's get to Rami real quick. See what he had to share for us. This is 51. Anybody would like to read this piece?
I'll read it.
Go ahead. All right. Alan, go ahead.
Sierra Club.
This is Rabbi Toflin's analogy of the spiritual quest. The day is short. There is only this moment. The task is long, for the distance between narrow mind and spacious mind appears immense. The workers are lazy. The challenge of turning seems to be great. The stakes are high. The very salvation of a person and planet depends upon it. The master is demanding. God accepts nothing but the whole. Hesitate and you are lost.
Yeah, it's a little bit different take from Rami. It's a little bit more of an urgent message. I think that you can have a broader sense of this. Workers are lazy. It doesn't mean that we're just lazy. It's just that sometimes we don't have the energy, we don't have the motivation, and you have that stack of books, and you go, oh, or that garden. Oh, it needs to be weeded, or those aphids are going to town, or look at whatever it is, but we don't have unlimited energy, and so that laziness just speaks to the fact is that we are limited. And so the idea is just do our best. The day's short and the task is long, and we have limited energy, but realize every day is our life and experience of it. I'm
looking at that and thinking workers to me means more that our brains, it's not that they're lazy, but we're resistant to change. We like our ideas. I think everybody should get vaccinated. I am really resistant to looking at the other side of that choice. And so I think it's really hard to put yourself in the other person's point of view and make that brain as spacious as ideally it should be.
Right. So I think you're right. For just looking at, the original Hebrew is not so much the stakes are high, but rather the hasachar arbe, that the reward is great, right? And so that's a little bit different than the stakes are high. The stakes are high is can even be the punishment. Oh boy, if I don't do this, there's going to be a price to pay. But rather just the opposite. If you do this, the reward, hasachar arbe, the reward is great.
What is the word? Oh, sorry. What is the word for workers in the original?
The hapoalim atzalim. Literally the workers are lazy. So that's a good translation. Right.
I just thought I was using my spacious brain to expand that.
Yeah. So it is, but again, but what does lazy mean, right? I think we do get exhausted. I look at my schedule and I go, okay, when I get home from this program, class, whatever it is, then I'll be able to write a little bit, read a little bit, and all the rest. But man, it turns out about 8:30 and 9, and then I'm like, I'm wiped out, and so that is a little bit of a laziness. How come I don't have more of that gear? Well, part of it is that I'm 63. I'm not right. I'm not that kid anymore. And yet, I do acknowledge that if there was something, if there was an emergency, if there was something pressing, it didn't matter how tired I am. I'm going to do it anyway. So how can I reserve that extra gear for just the emergency? And that's something I have to deal with. I have to work on that. Let's look at number 21, the 21st Mishnah. Anybody? Julia, you want to read that one? Can I?
Yeah, I can read this one.
Thank you.
This one's famous, isn't it?
They're all famous. I thought the 220.
This one I hear repeated all the time. Rabbi Tarfon also says, you're not obligated to complete the task, nor are you free to abandon it.
That's the famous part.
That's the famous part, yeah. If you have studied, but they never go on to the rest. If you have studied much Torah, you will reap great reward. You can rely on your employer to pay you your due, but not in the currency of this world, but rather the world to come.
So the employer here he's taken as a reference to God. You want to go ahead and read 52 and 53 on the other side?
Sure. Having frightened his students with the previous teaching, Rabbi Tarfon softens it with this one. While the task is long and the time is short, you are not obligated to complete it. Effort alone is what matters. The reward for returning to your true nature is not wealth or power, self-esteem or fame, but the ability to see the part in the whole and thus escape the fear, anger, violence, and greed that come with imagining you are apart from rather than a part of God.
That deserves to be
I like
read
that
again, that
one.
little phrase, that the ability to see the part in the whole and thus escape the fear, anger, violence, and greed that comes with imagining that you are apart from rather than a part of God. I just think that's spectacular. Anyone want to share on any of that?
Well, I think if you consider yourself apart from God, it's easy to resort to violence and crime and theft and all of the ills of the world. Whereas if you consider yourself a part of God, you have a moral standard to live up to.
But consider this: if you're a part of God, so is everyone else in your world, right?
Right?
I mean, there's a God that Adonai Echad. There's a united sense of life. So my violence, my lust, my greed, my whatever that impacts on someone else, I can't have a relationship with God and then be abusive.
Right. That's what I'm saying. If you don't consider yourself a part of God, it's much easier to be abusive.
And everyone else. Nancy.
This made me think, this is about the spacious mind and how your mind is monkey mind. It just goes all over the place. And this is great. When I was a kid and attended religious school, we studied from a book called A Little Lower Than the Angels. Are you familiar with that, Rabbi?
Absolutely. That was one of the main texts in the old Reform religious schools. Yeah.
And
we have a case of them still, Nancy and Janet.
I would love one. Because I want to know what I learned. What it says, what it says to me now is we can't forget that we're not apart from, we're a part of, and we're just a little bit lower than that. And to get out of ego and to be more expansive in understanding that we're all part of the universe and think about others, not just about ourselves.
Wonderful. Very good. Yeah, Arnie, please.
I'd like to swing back a little bit because I'd like to have the Julia principle, the brain thing. I like that brain because you're dealing with kids. Okay, no, but I mean, the point I would like to make, or you made, which I agree, is that when we teach, part of the teaching is try to encourage the spacious brain, not to stifle it. I mean, there was a time way back, a lot of other places still do that. They stifle that. Judaism in general has tried to develop it. Schools, good teachers, I've always found, try to develop it. It's what later on allows you to be flexible. It also allows you to be creative, etc. And when I read these Pirkei Avot, there's almost like a back and forth. Teacher's trying to explain to the student why he's doing it. The student, he's kind of impressing on him. The benefit here is you might not understand why I want you to expand your brain. But this is going to benefit you later. Do our schools really keep up with that now? You know what I'm saying? And there was this idea of, because I know there's spin-off schools that, that really pride themselves on that. General education, what is your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, I teach art at a community center and I taught art at colleges for years and I teach private lessons too. So I'm not super familiar with how the schools are teaching. I just see my kids coming home and, I'm like, how is it going? Are you learning things? What are you learning? Because schools are so focused on the basics, reading, writing, math. Like they're just desperate to get kids to grade level on those three things. I think that later, maybe past elementary school, I'll let you know, they can start doing more with the kids. Like, and my daughter's just entered, she just started 5th grade So I asked the teachers, I'm like, what are they going to learn this year? Like, because they've gotten to the point where they can read and they can do some math and they can write. Like, so now they're ready to think. And I was asked them, like, what are you going to cover? You know, and social studies and science and, you know, and they're going to cover a lot of stuff in the course of the year. It'll be overwhelming, I think. I don't know how they're going to have to ask them to think, though, because a lot of the stuff they're going to talk about are big things, you know. So I don't know. I don't really know what schools do now. Like, there probably could be more, but I don't know. I
Do we
wish
have
I
any
had
other
better for you.
teachers, Fern and Nancy? What?
I'll go through.
Oh, I was going, that good teachers ask even the youngest children to think,
Yes.
you know, what else could it be? What could this be? What, you know, what do you think about that?
Right.
I would say the problem with being able to have, you know, to have this spacious brain and see things in a nuanced way is making decisions is so much harder than if you're absolutely sure you know the right answer. But that would be a downside. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you. I'll expand on what you were saying. I am originally a preschool educator. As a matter of fact, I developed Sinai's preschool 46 years ago. And then, and I'm sure now, all good teachers ask open-ended questions to get kids to think. And so I want to believe and hope that that's what all teachers are, good teachers are doing now. We're not just teaching facts. We're teaching, the goal is to teach kids how to think. And I'm watching my oldest grandchildren who are 25 and 22, and I'm watching their friends, and I'm seeing how strong and capable, and it's your kids, Rabbi, how strong and capable they are. And they only got that way because they were taught to think. So I have hope in this younger generation. I'm going off on a tangent.
No, but you're right. I want to point out, each one of us have had great teachers, and each one of us have had teachers who are not great.
Right.
And, you know, my youngest just graduated from CU and now is off to grad school and all the rest. And there were some magnificent classes and professors who challenged each of my kids and through law school as well. Wonderful professors. And then there were professors, you know, this past year they're at home. And so a couple of professors, they would send home these weekly quizzes, right? Just so they can keep up with the reading. And the questions were so inane. The questions were so ill thought. I mean, they did not consider what the idea of these students learning something, because what they were asking, just as demonstrated to the professor, did not know what the hell she was talking about. And the whole goal of it, and this is what the kids had to do, seriously, there would be a phrase in the readings, so the kids simply then did a search for that phrase or that word and found the quote totally out of context and out of relationship to something that was factual or true. It just showed them that they had read that text, right? But where's the learning of it? All right, there's no learning, there was no comprehension, there's no deep understanding, and so there are those professors who will go that way. But each of us, thank God, have also had some fabulous professors, and we need more of those. That's college, man. That wasn't.
I am just so appalled that, I mean, that is pointless.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is that a Judaic thing you're describing, Rabbi? Not with this idea, because when you read like Pirkei Avot, that's what they're encouraging. Encouraging the spacious brain, if you want.
Right, of course.
And they're putting some boundary around it, and they've got to understand. People try to make the student understand why they're doing it. That's what they're encouraging. But know how to challenge, know how to answer a challenge. These are thinking things.
Yeah, but there's always a distance between our ideal and the reality. and we have to acknowledge the inadequacy. The cool thing is we do have some inspired and fabulous, wonderful teachers at every level. The question is, can the kids survive the others?
Please tell us it wasn't a Jewish professor sending those
I'm
assignments.
not making any comments. This is all being recorded. It's going to be online. I'm probably going to get in trouble anyway. My kid's going to say, Dad. But it's true. Anyway, so where we are. Good. All right. And now 21. Anybody?
We already read that.
Go ahead. Jerry, you want to read that one? Oh, did we this one?
We read that
Yeah,
one.
we
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
read that.
Now we're in chapter 3. Hooray. So let's go to a couple real quick. 3:1 is large and somewhat challenging. So Jerry, why don't you go ahead and give us that, and we'll take some time with it.
Sure. Kavya ben Mahalalel teaches, reflect on 3 things that come to no harm. Where you come from, where you're going, and to whom you are to give account. Where do you come from? From a bitter drop of sperm? Where are you going? To dust, worms, maggots? To whom are you to give account? To the one who cannot be deceived?
That's a period. One who's not to be deceived. So again, this is the challenge, right? And so we're going to look at this before we get to Rami. Wow. Where you're coming from, where you're going, and to whom you give account. Think this for a second here. What does that strike to you as?
This is what Elul is all about. What we're supposed to think about and work on during Elul.
Okay. The cheshbon nefesh, to reconsider what I've become as a human being, right?
Yep. What good have I done for others, for my community, for people, for myself? Where am I going? How can I help my community, my temple, my people, my family? And to whom am I reporting to, so to speak? It's to the powers, to the great power to be. It is.
Julia, what's your take?
I think it goes back to the being a part of or apart from God, that it comes back to that idea of what are you a part of rather than what are you apart from? Where have you been? Where are you going? To whom are you accountable? It's all God. But finding your place within that process and journey.
I love that. That's wonderful. Who else? I mean, it's sort of, the maggots thing. I mean, that we don't want to go there, do we? Right? I mean, that's pretty darn harsh. But how real is it?
It is real.
Right? And we don't, again, and by just putting that in my mind, then immediately I should be humbled, right? I mean, that's the thing. I get so arrogant when I consider position, power, respect, my pride, my dignity, right? And so get off of dignity. Does anyone get Smithsonian Magazine? No? Well, I hope you do one day. The most recent one has a large, wonderful article on the latest archaeological find in Egypt, Saqqara, that was basically a necropolis, a huge cemetery. But of course, it dates back 3,000, in some cases even longer ago. And they have uncovered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of not only the mummies for humans, but of cats and of dogs and of falcons. There was even a mummified beetle, scarab beetle. So amazing things in statuary and all the rest that has just come out most recently. And I think there's going to be a documentary on it, but Smithsonian had this wonderful profile. And one of the things that surprised them, because we're used to, anybody been to Egypt? Go to Egypt, you go and there's, if you go down to Luxor, for instance, and you see the Valley of the Kings, you go on the Queen and the huge temple at Karnak, and the elite and what they built for themselves and their mausoleums and their crypts. But at this Saqqara, there was, they had a huge, a very long shaft down below. And it was all for the middle class and upper middle class. Now, the very, very poor were just buried in linen or sheets and out and done. The very, very wealthy had their, their huge monuments. But for everyone else, they had these, the mummies and their sarcophagi that were down in the shaft, and then in an expanse of room after room after room for the largest of areas. And you could tell, because they would show those who were lower middle class and those who were middle class and those who were upper middle class, right? Because some of them had the gold leaf and the gold masks and the fancy coffin, the mummy box, and others had something quite simple, unadorned, etc. The thing that the reason I mention it, because you were wondering that too. Why in the hell is it going there? Because they were stacked on top of each other, right? They were all, this one was from the lower middle class, that one's from the upper middle class, right on top of each other in a big old jumble. For them, the key was the placement of that shaft and the room next to this cliff that was considered to be a little bit, had greater mojo for navigating the world to come. But there was a telescoping of the distance between those who were the have-nots relatively and those who were of greater means, so that even if you had that gold mask and the coffin that was truly ornate, filled with jewels and all the statues, you might be buried right next to one who was just in a plain box with almost nothing else in it. And there's a humility there too. Go to our cemeteries. We walk up and down Mount Nebo or Rose, etc. And there are some simple monuments, simple stela, a little stone, and then there are some very quite elaborate, but we're all buried in the same place. And we, no matter how much you got, we're going to that same place. Well, I very seldom, I think this is the first time in my life I've ever quoted Snoop Dogg in a Torah class, right? Snoop Dogg in a Torah class. There you go there. Write that one down. Snoop Dogg says, into the hole we all go, right? Into the hole we all go. And there's something quite humbling about that. And I think that is reflected. I didn't know that Snoop Dogg had studied this part of the Pirkei Avot. And he's always surprising us. But okay, before we leave, we got to see what Rami had to say about any of this. I bet you Rami didn't quote Snoop Dogg. All right, who would like to read number one? I'll make it larger for you.
I can read, Rabbi.
Would you please? Whoops, I just messed up. Sorry.
Let's see. Hasidic Jews have a saying, people should carry 2 slips of paper with them at all times. This is famous also. On one is written, you are the reason the world was created. On the other, you are nothing but dust and ash. When you forget your true identity as God manifest, read the first. When you mistake yourself for someone special, read the second. I like that when you
Yeah,
mistake yourself. No, just that wording, when you mistake yourself. Well, I don't know. Maybe you are somebody special. Anyway, that's not what it means. But read the second. In this way, you avoid falling into the traps of self-negation and megalomania.
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 Yeah. I.e. that I'm too big for my britches.
Mhm.
Go ahead. You want to read the next one too?
On the one hand, you are nothing but sperm and egg, a vehicle for transmitting genetic code from one generation to another. On the other, you are to worms what a beef cow may be to you, lunch. And yet you are held accountable to God, the undeceivable. Why? Because everything matters to God. Why? Because everything is God. You are the way God writes symphonies and bad checks. You are the way God cries over newborns and last breaths. You are the way God is God as you. It is you to whom God points and says to the worms, "This is my body." It is you to whom God points and says to the fleas, "This is my blood." You are the way God eats and is eaten. Do not be deceived. You are nothing more and nothing less. How marvelous.
There's a lot of challenge there. A lot of challenge there. I.e., if I'm of God, not apart from him, if I'm of God, then the choices I make are what I'm doing with my godliness. And that means sometimes I schmutz it by doing the wrong thing, by being egomaniacal, by being selfish, by being cruel, by being a liar or a cheater. And then I diminish that godly within me, but it's still there. And that's how I've reflected God, but I've reflected God poorly. On the other hand, I can make other kind of choices. So how those choices we make depends on, helps to influence how God is in this world. It's a little pantheistic. And I wouldn't go there totally on my theology, but at a time for being challenged and to think of myself in, not just in relationship to God, which puts a distance, but reflective of God in our world, and the choices I make will have an impact, positively or negatively. So there's a lot there that we have. So we'll let me share something along those lines this Friday night at services. We have 6 o'clock. Rabbi Jordy and I are here in the sanctuary. I know it's going to be hard for some people. We talked about this at the healing service earlier. For more and more people are realizing that they probably shouldn't be close to other people. And I fully respect that. We not only are going to maintain our classes virtually and our services virtually, we've enhanced them this last week and going forward in this Zwerin Sanctuary. We have not 1, not 2, but 3 different cameras and an operator back there, hopefully, and we'll get better and better. And the same thing for the holidays. So come when you feel comfortable. We are going to have some people, God willing, in. But if you are going to come in, you're going to have to wear a mask. And if you are vulnerable, make the smart decision. Still know that we can connect with one another by phone, by Zoom, and eventually, if we're safe with one another, if we wear our masks, if we get vaccinated, get our booster shot, yay, when we can, that we'll be able to be in the same room with each other. I absolutely adore our times together for study and conversation, and I look forward, I hope that you'll be back next Thursday as well as we continue.
Amen. Shana Tova.
I
Thank
want
you,
to say some things. Julia, I'm happy your daughter goes to a school that teaches math. What school is that?
We're in Jefferson County, and it's called Governor's Ranch Elementary. And I love the school. So I'm not worried that she'll learn to think.
Yeah, you should.
I just don't know exactly what happens in the classroom, but I know she's learning math.
And then for the rabbi, when you have 3 cameras, you have a good director who may win an Emmy or an Oscar. And
It may, but we'll see how it works. You know, it's just our attempt to try to create a better experience for those at home. And I know that's sort of a lost cause because there's nothing like being together when we've been able to even for the oneg, they hand you a bag with a cookie or pretzel, whatever it is. And it's not the same, but man, it's just wonderful to see each other. But we're going to have to chill it for a while. And, you know, I'm not one that is, I'm with it. I'm with a lot of people a lot, right? Whether it's a funeral or a shiva or a bar mitzvah or whatever the gathering is. And for the last couple of months, we haven't had the mask. There are people wearing them, but I'm vaccinated. But I'm going to have to go back to being much more cautious, both for my own protection as well as the fact that even if I'm safe, I may be transmitting. That's two. And number three, I've got a role model as well. When I'm speaking from the bima, I will not wear a mask. I can't breathe. My glasses fog up. So not breathing and not seeing, that's usually not conducive to a decent service. But otherwise, I'll wear a mask, and I hope you will too, to be safe as we get through this next crunch. Okay.
Rabbi,
We're not going to get. Oh, sorry, Alan. I didn't.
No, go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say we're not going to get rid of in-person services, right? Because
no, ma'am. We already have
okay.
a couple of hundred signed up for the morning of Rosh Hashanah and the morning of Yom Kippur. So sign up, right? And we're going to, but we have room, Julia, for 1,500. We may limit it. I mean, that's up to the board and all the rest. They'll limit it maybe to 400 or 500, whatever. But we'll have to wear a mask.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I have the last thing I want to say with respect to your comments about making complaints. There was 5 senior women from the sisterhood went to the bagel to eat, and the bagel deli, and the waiter came over and says, "Do you have any more complaints?"
All right.
Honey, thank you.
All right, guys. Love you. Be good. Be healthy.
Thank you.